Now that we have discussed the ways that cognitive biases and logical fallacies can prevent us from being consumers of messages, we need to start building the skills needed to thoughtfully and critically evaluate messages before we decide whether to believe and to be persuaded by the messages that we see, hear, and make every day. Now, to evaluate messages, we first need to be able to pay attention to and understand what is being said, which is why we need to work on our listening skills. Listening is defined as the process of receiving, constructing meaning from, and responding to spoken and or nonverbal messages. While hearing involves the physiological process of perceiving sound waves as they reach our ears, listening is more complex, social, psychological, and contextual process of making and interpreting meaning by what we hear and observe in our interactions with others. Listening is a six-part process that can be remembered through its acronym, the hearer or hewer. My apologies if I mispronounced this. And this was proposed by Brownell in 96. Now, here's the acronym. The first letter is H, and the H stands for hearing, which is perceiving sounds and movements communicated by others verbally and non-verbally. This also includes signs and gestures, such as when someone is communicating through American Sign Language. Second letter is U, and U represents understanding, which is making sense of the verbal and non-verbal cues that are being perceived, which requires understanding the words and languages being spoken or signed. Next letter is R, which stands for remembering, which is storing the words in your memory long enough to further process what was said or signed. Next letter is I, which stands for interpreting, which means making meaning out of the combination of all the verbal and nonverbal messages that were conveyed during the interaction. Next letter is E, which stands for evaluating, which means making judgments about the messages and deciding whether it is true or false, positive or negative, etc. Last but not least, the last letter is R, which stands for responding, which means that signaling that you have received the message and giving verbal and or nonverbal feedback. To simplify this, you can think about it like this. The first two steps or the first two letters will fall into the category of sensing. Next step is processing the information, and the last step is responding. Listening is a complex process that demands a great deal of attention and both cognitive and emotional processing. To listen skillfully requires that you be fully present in your interaction with others and be in tune to all the ways that they are sending messages, not simply the words that are being said. Effective listening also requires you to attempt to fully understand the other person's thoughts, perspectives, and feelings before returning to your own mind to respond what is shared. Listening is an art form and a skill